My name is Stapczynski. I lead Bloomberg News Asia energy coverage. Thank you for joining us today for this fireside chat. I'm joined by Rajan Sawhney. She is the Minister for Indigenous Relations for Alberta. Let's just, kick it off. I could go on and on about the natural resources in Alberta, but you are much better placed to do that for me. Could you list some stats about what makes Alberta the place that we should be watching for the future of energy?
Well, thank you for that. And first of all, before I begin, I just want to take a moment just to express some gratitude to the Honorable Minister Shri Hardeep Singh Puri for inviting us to this fantastic conference. And we're certainly delighted to be here, and we're definitely taking a Team Canada approach. But it's very important to talk about Alberta. Now, when we talk about Canadian energy, the reality is that 97% of that comes from Alberta. And we have tremendous resources. We have the fourth largest reserves in terms of oil, and we have the ninth largest reserves in terms of natural gas. The numbers are staggering. And if we're talking about oil, it's 167 billion barrels of recoverable reserves. Natural gas is almost 144 TCF of recoverable reserves. So these numbers are, when I talk to people here at the conference, I have to repeat them so that they're aware that there's tremendous opportunity in Alberta.
And, speaking of the conference, we're here in India, in beautiful Goa. Could you kind of go over some of your objectives that you have here for this week and the relationship with India here?
That's a really good question, and Goa is indeed beautiful. It's my first time being here. But I have a very clear mandate, and that is to deepen the bonds of friendship with India. We know that given the changing geopolitical landscape, and it's very dynamic, it's changing all the time, that security of supply is on top of mind for most nations, and certainly that's the case for Canada. It's the case for India, so it's important to focus on diversification, and we have a lot of things in Alberta, in Canada, that India is interested in, like LNG and LPG. So part of my mandate has been listening to really ascertain the opportunities and then to tell the Alberta story and to talk about the Alberta value proposition.
And just to get this, get over this as well, what authority gives Alberta jurisdiction over its energy resources and development? Could you walk me through that a little bit?
Yes, Alberta is the owner of its resources. So we are a subnational government, like a state, and the Constitution indicates that the states are responsible for their natural resources. So we spend a lot of time making sure that other jurisdictions are aware of that. And in fact, the first oil well was drilled in Leduc, Alberta in 1947 that kickstarted an energy boom. So we have deep expertise and experience in energy, particularly in the oil sands. And it's interesting when we talk about this story that a lot of people aren't really aware of that. Because again, Canadian energy, yes, but 97% of it comes from Alberta.
I just need to ask as well, if we were having this conference in 2020, I think a lot of the focus would be on renewable energy and maybe even hydrogen. But over the last few years with what's happened with natural gas prices, with oil prices, the volatility, as well as energy shortages, especially in this part of the world, I think there's been a big focus on developing the natural resources, not just within countries that are developing, but also partner countries as well. Have you seen a shift within your state, within the people, the voters, as well as the government, towards developing more of those natural resources, be it oil or gas?
We have always taken a very pragmatic, practical approach to energy. We know that the demand for oil and gas is not going anywhere, and we knew that even in 2020. And our perspective has always been that that demand is in place. It's going to be increasing, especially here in India. It's the fastest growing economy. The population is increasing, so we know that there is going to be even further demand. But I've always said that it is not an either or conversation, it's an and. We have to make sure we're looking at conventional resources and also looking at the renewable space as well. And that is an area of commonality here in India. I know there is a big effort towards decarbonization, and certainly that is happening in Alberta as well. And we have a number of technologies that I'd love to chat about that actually could be exported here in Alberta that could help, in India, that could help with that effort.
Fantastic. Now, just looking here at the title for this, this title is Energy Talk. It's a province taking global stage. Could you maybe just expand more on why Alberta is doing this and why India, why now? Can you go a little bit deeper into that?
Yes. So as I'd mentioned, diversification is on our mind. It's really important. I've already talked about the changing geopolitical landscape. To find other customers, right now we only have one customer, which is the south of Canada, is the United States. And so we know that there is demand in Asia for our products. And certainly LNG Canada delivered its first set of exports last year in June of 2025. And that's why we want to have these conversations with our Indian counterparts to talk about what those opportunities could be. And Alberta offers a lot more than just our reserves and our liquids and our oil. We have incredible expertise in this area. In terms of technology, I can tell you, for example, Packers Plus is an Alberta-based company. In 2013, developed multi-stage fracking. And that technology is what actually caused the shale revolution in the United States.
I didn't know that.
Yes,
That's
it's a true story, and that technology was developed in Alberta. Huh. That's one example. We have incredible technology around methane emissions reductions. And again, India is really focused on decarbonization, and they're talking a lot about green hydrogen. And we have expertise in Alberta that could help with that endeavor.
Now, let's just talk about LNG for a second. LNG Canada, again, like you said, came online last year. They're bringing on potentially another part of the project later this decade, which is being discussed with Shell and its partners. There are a number of other projects dotting that coast, the west coast of Australia. I'm sorry, of Canada. What do you see a rapid growth in LNG demand from Asia for this product? When you're in meetings, is LNG one of the top one of the top topics that you discuss with potential overseas partners? Could you kind of walk me through how LNG is changing how you view natural gas in Alberta?
In one word, yes, there is increasing demand. I certainly heard that over and over with my meetings yesterday with some of the CEOs and the chairmen of the various state-owned companies. And we have been in discussions with Japan and South Korea. There is tremendous demand, and we have tremendous natural gas. And you had mentioned some of these projects that are dotting the BC coast. LNG Canada, obviously, it's exported volumes out to Asian markets already. And there's 4 other projects that are going to be coming online relatively soon in the coming years. And the companies that I spoke to yesterday expressed great interest in learning more about these projects. And we had even floated the idea of equity participation in any future projects that might arise. So the conversations are ongoing. We will be connecting with our Indian counterparts here as well to connect them to some of these facilities and some of the folks who are investing there. And it really is the story. It's a story of, displacing coal-powered electricity with LNG. And that, again, is on the path to decarbonization.
One of the big topics in the United States is about affordability of domestic gas. The U.S. shale revolution unlocked a lot of gas that was then used for export. And a big discussion over the last few years has been, with U.S. LNG exports increasing so drastically, what does that mean for domestic gas prices? The industry says that despite increases in LNG exports, prices in the U.S. for gas will remain lower. Is there a risk that if you increase drastically LNG exports from Canada and the gas being sourced from Alberta, that you could see higher prices for consumers in your region?
That conversation has been had, and I, talked about this with some of the economists that are Alberta-based, and they don't see a big impact with increased LNG exports as of this point in terms of what we know now. And time will tell. We do know that with additional LNG exports, it's going to be incredibly beneficial to the customers who are receiving that supply, but it's going to be good for Canada as well from a value perspective.
Oh, that's really very interesting. Thanks for that. what are the other, we talked about LNG, we've talked about oil. What are other opportunities for Indian companies in Alberta? You mentioned technology a moment ago. What could you expand on that? What other natural resources are there that they could potentially invest in or look at?
So again, based on the conversations we had yesterday, LPG is something that's very much in demand, and we have 2 export facilities at the Port of Prince Rupert who are exporting LPG, and there's an additional 2 projects that should be coming online soon. That is something that was emphasized over and over again. Critical minerals keeps coming up, and we have lots of lithium in Alberta. We have other critical minerals that we can discuss with India. And there was interest in actually coming to Alberta and explore that further from a mining perspective. Certainly we are, a leader in the renewables. When you talk about geothermal, we're the largest producer of hydrogen as well. And the green hydrogen story here is really interesting. Minister Puri mentioned that yesterday, that he's a strong believer in green hydrogen, and we have lots of institutions in Alberta that have worked on hydrogen. It's mainly blue hydrogen at this point, but we have a Center for Excellence in Hydrogen, and we also have a hydrogen hub, and our academic institutions are very, very well advanced in R&D. I used to be the Minister for Advanced Education, so I'm very well versed in this area. The relationships that our Alberta institutes have with Indian institutes here, we've got relationships with with I think 8 IITs, and it's all R&D based in areas in renewables and energy.
That's the hydrogen story in Alberta is really fascinating. How did that happen? How did Alberta become such a leader? What lessons could India learn from that?
Well, we are the largest producer of hydrogen in the country, so ample hydrogen is there, and we know that it could potentially be used to power very heavy vehicles like trucks and things like that. But it became very apparent that we needed to have a strategy. So we have a hydrogen roadmap that has been developed that talks about the additional steps that need to be taken in terms of how to monetize these ample supplies. There was some discussion about transporting hydrogen through ammonia. That's not really on the table at this point. But there's also huge demand in Asia for hydrogen. So we're going to be having further conversations in terms of what those opportunities look like. But right now, we're going to focus on how we can expand the hydrogen economy domestically. And there are some opportunities actually in high-speed rail, hydrogen-powered locomotives and things like that. So that's something that is way into the future. I know our Premier is a rail enthusiast, and she's talked about this as well. But lots of opportunities. And in terms of what India can learn, I have talked about this in our meetings as well, that there's deep, deep expertise in this area. But conversely, I'd really like to learn more about the electrolysis process in green hydrogen and how they're going to make it economic here in Alberta. I've always been told in all jurisdictions that I've traveled to that was a difficult proposition to actually make it affordable. But what I'm hearing is that it's on the horizon. So that is something that we can learn from India.
I mean, I think certainly when you look at the story of solar, for example, solar panels for such a long time were prohibitively expensive, but the industry was able to innovate and bring down the prices. And I think that's what, in the discussions I'm having as well with Indian companies, they're trying to do that. I mean, that's certainly a partnership that Alberta can bring if you have so much expertise and from your region to bring it over to India and trade that sort of knowledge. It only benefits both sides. Yeah,
and that's why it's great to have these relationships with the academic institutions. And we have one of our specialists who actually wrote the strategy. He's a frequent attendee here at the conference, and I know he's talking about how to do that knowledge exchange as we speak.
Now, your title is Minister of Indigenous Relations, so I think we should ask some questions related to that. But how does Indigenous partnerships play a role in energy development? And also, can you list maybe some tangible success stories that we can kind of take something away from it?
Yeah, absolutely. So Indigenous communities play an integral role in resource development. And I just want to point out this pin that I'm wearing. This is from Capawano First Nation. They are very pro-development. The Chief Sidney Halkirk actually provided me with this pin, so I wanted to make sure that I was wearing it today. But as we're talking about development projects, I mean, the duty to consult is constitutionally entrenched. And it's very important that when we're talking about new infrastructure, like this new Northwest Coast pipeline that we're talking about, that we're engaging with Indigenous communities, because we want to make sure that if there's anything that's impacting their treaty rights around harvesting, fishing, hunting, that it is considered and that their voices are intrinsic to the development of the project. Now, in Alberta, we have Fort Mackay First Nation, Chief Raymond Powder. They are overseeing oil sands development, and they've got all kinds of projects underway. We also have a Crown corporation called the Alberta Indigenous Opportunities Corporation. And what that corporation does is it provides loan guarantees to Indigenous communities so they can actually have equity in this infrastructure. And it has been a game changer because it means sustainable revenues for these communities. It means it provides more social acceptability to get these projects underway. And there is a website that we have that has a number of projects listed with Indigenous participation and equity ownership that are, true winning stories, game changers. And, I'd be happy to talk about that a bit more, maybe offline, because it could be a long conversation and we could be here for another hour.
Well, I'm particularly interested in pipelines. So if there's
am I.
Okay. Well, could we talk a little bit more? Sorry, the Northwest pipeline that's being developed. Can you kind of break down? Of course, there are the Indigenous factors that you need to get through. What are other hurdles that need to be kind of overcome before this can really become a reality?
Yes, so Bill C-5 was passed by the federal government last year, and the Major Projects Office was opened up in Calgary, and we know that federal regulations were serving as impediments to some of this critical infrastructure that we want to develop. That's aside from the Indigenous piece, and I'll chat about that in a minute. So that's why we signed a historic MOU with the federal government last November. Minister Hodgson was a part of that. I was part of the negotiating team. And what it does is it provides conditions, some of the regulatory barriers, like, for example, the federal government was proposing an emissions cap. That is no longer going to happen. Clean electricity regulations. There could be an exemption to the tanker ban, which is really critical. You can't have a tanker ban in place if you want to build a pipeline to the Northwest Coast. So that MOU lays the framework and the foundation for moving ahead. We are putting an application together right now as we speak to the Major Projects Office to get this pipeline built. Now, part of this also means Indigenous engagement and consultation. So I'm from Alberta, and the pipeline is going to go through BC towards the BC coast. So my job right now is to engage with some of these First Nations and really talk about the benefits and really listen to their concerns. So that work is underway as we speak, and we have to make sure that our duty to consult is fulfilled once we put our application underway. I feel like I'm giving a lot of detail here, but this is essentially what it takes to get this pipeline built. But I want to emphasize that it's a nation-building project, and we have to get these types of critical infrastructure built to get our product to Asian markets. And I know that the federal government is very well aware that this is going to be critical for our position as an energy superpower. You can't claim to be an energy superpower if you can't monetize your projects with new customers.
That's well said. Now, what type of timeline should we be expecting for this pipeline? I know that there still needs a lot to be done, but the MOU was just signed. What's your view on it? How quickly do you think you can get these details in order for it to come online?
The MOU does commit to expedited approval timelines, and we are going to push for that. My premier is definitely going to hold the government to account on that. But despite my saying that, we all are aware that this has to be done. So once the approval process goes through, then it's just the time that it takes to actually build the pipeline itself. And that could be 5 years from now, hopefully sooner, because time is of the essence. And, we never know what's going to happen, tomorrow in terms of geopolitics. So we're very motivated in Alberta to make sure that this happens.
And when we're talking about, again, going back to LNG, apologies, I'm particularly obsessed with LNG, but when you're talking about this build out of LNG in Canada, does it require more pipelines as well? Is there more infrastructure that needs to be built? Do you need to have discussions with Indigenous population as well? How do you see that kind of going forward?
Yes, whenever there's any infrastructure that's going to be built, you do have to engage. That duty to consult, like I said, is entrenched in our constitution. That has to happen, and the BC government has to do their part as well. And as we're talking about bringing on additional LNG, it will require more pipelines. And we had some conversations with organizations like Cedar LNG. They're going to be coming online soon. They're very interested in our natural gas. And in Canada, and BC is well known in terms of how much natural gas we have. And so those conversations are happening in real time.
Great. And then, just to kind of, as we're wrapping up India Energy Week, what can you share? You've been here, you went to the gala yesterday. What can you share that you've seen at this conference that kind of makes you excited, one? And how do you think it will help advance relations between Alberta and India?
Well, I think the attendance at this conference has really been eye-opening. I've heard numbers like 50,000 people who are attending the conference. And it's really clear that energy is central to the Indian economy. India is like becoming an energy hub. That's been very clearly demonstrated here at the conference. And I'm just reflecting on the words of His Excellency Sultan Ahmed Al Jaber yesterday. He was saying, if you stand still, you're actually moving backwards. While in Alberta, nobody is standing still, in Canada especially, and nobody here is standing still. There is a real awareness that it's a very dynamic, rapidly changing environment, and everybody wants to understand how to move forward. I've been very, very impressed by some of the technology I've seen here. I've talked a little bit about what we have in Alberta and our deep expertise in terms of decarbonization, but there's lots of really, really interesting things happening here in India. And we would love to learn more and bring some of those learnings back to Alberta.
What kind of technology? What got you excited?
It's green hydrogen. As I said, I've been hearing that it's economical to produce, and I need to learn more. I want to get into the weeds and get into the technical details. So I will be meeting with some officials next week when I'm in Delhi just to ask some more questions around that.
And I mean, clearly you see some areas between clean energy tech between India and Alberta, hydrogen. What else do you think could have potential between the two nations beyond that?
We had some brief discussion earlier about nuclear energy.
Okay.
I heard Minister Puri talk about that in his keynote, or perhaps it was on the panel, that he was a believer, but you didn't have the social acceptability at one point here. And I was told that there was a bill passed recently allowing for private investment into this space, but Alberta is pursuing a nuclear strategy, and that is something that I think we can synergize and partner on, and just exchange knowledge about this whole area as well.
That's really interesting. What you're speaking about is the Shanty bill. There was this new bill that was passed in December. It allows for foreign companies to come in and provide technology for nuclear reactors for the first time. But it's interesting that you're pulling together a roadmap as well at home. What do you think? I know that it's still in the works, but what's the overarching goal for do you think will become for nuclear power in Alberta?
We're exploring right now. We're putting a strategy together. We know SMRs are going to be very important. I was in South Korea a couple of years ago, and we did sign an MOU. They're leaders in this space, and there's tremendous opportunity, especially in rural and remote communities where access to power and heat can sometimes be challenging. SMR would be a great opportunity for that. And it would be remiss for me also not to talk about data centers.
Sure, of course.
We have a huge data center strategy. There's 3 different pillars associated with that. We are a very ideal climate place to have data centers where it's very cool in Alberta. Obviously, great natural gas resources and a great fiscal regime to invest in.
Well, this has been a really great discussion. I think to wrap this up, it does seem that Alberta's energy strategy at home and abroad is all of the above, right? I mean, between natural gas, oil, you spoke about nuclear just now, and also green hydrogen, it sounds like there's a wealth of opportunity both within Alberta itself, but also ways to collaborate with India, which is, of course, as we've learned over these last few days, a very fast-growing country with a lot of energy needs.
Yes, absolutely. We are an energy province. I didn't even talk about geothermal as of yet.
Let's talk about geothermal. We got a minute. Let's talk about geothermal. What's going on with geothermal?
Yeah, great advancements in Alberta in terms of geothermal. And I know that I was talking to a few companies who are basically kicking tires and wanting to learn more about that.
Yeah.
I've connected them to some organizations in our province.
Oh, wow. So it really is a bit of everything. That's very exciting. Well, unfortunately, we're essentially out of time. But thank you so much for joining me today to kind of geek out on energy and geopolitics and relationships between countries. So thank you so much for your time. And